This is an LA Times Studios podcast.
Chris Goffard here at LA Times Studios. Thanks for joining us on Crimes of the Times. In today's episode, the story of a renowned fire investigator who turned out to be a prolific arsonist and whose thinly veiled novel proved to be a key piece of evidence against him. Tell us what you think in the comments below. As a fire investigator, John Orr seemed to have instincts that verged on the superhuman. During his years at the Glendale Fire Department, the city experienced a spate of suspicious fires, and Orr had an uncanny knack for finding the incendiary device that started them. He bragged of catching more than 40 serial arsonists. He published articles regularly on the psychology of firebugs, and he trained investigators across the state in how to find them. One of his maxims was, "The bug is in the crowd." When a mysterious fire ignited at Ole's Home Center in South Pasadena in October 1984, it did not seem out of place when Orr showed up. Orr was a few miles outside his jurisdiction, but he happened to be in the area, and he began snapping photographs. The fire killed 4 people, including a 2-year-old boy and his grandmother. Orr announced it had the markings of arson and was irate when the sheriff's department ruled it an accident, likely started by electrical wiring. Years later, Orr was peddling a novel called Points of Origin. It's about a Southern California arson investigator who derives a sexual thrill from setting fires himself and who uses his special knowledge to avoid capture. In Chapter 6, Orr's villain, Aaron, drops an incendiary device into the foam cushions of a South Pasadena hardware store called Cal's. 4 people fail to find their way out and die in terror. The fire was ineptly termed accidental, Orr wrote. Aaron wanted the Cal's fire to be arson. He loved the inadvertent attention he derived from the newspaper coverage and hated it when he wasn't properly recognized. The deaths were blotted out of his mind. It wasn't his fault, the novel continued, just stupid people acting as stupid people do. The FBI would eventually call Orr the most prolific serial arsonist of the 20th century, and prosecutors would present his manuscript as a thinly veiled memoir of his crimes, at least some of his crimes, the true number of which is a mystery.
Truthfully, we really don't know how many, because this guy literally set thousands of fires.
This is Marvin Casey, a retired Bakersfield fire captain who was on to John Orr before anyone else. On this episode of Crimes of the Times, Casey tells us how hard it was to get anyone to believe his hunch about the star arson investigator and how he found the key piece of evidence that implicated him. Later in the show, I also talked to Orr, the arsonist/novelist himself, who still insists he is innocent and that he was railroaded for a piece of fiction.
You know, everybody, he was really, really popular. Everybody knew him and everybody admired John. And he was a really good instructor.
Like many fire investigators across California, Marvin Casey received specialized training from John Orr, the Glendale Fire Department captain who had made a name for himself as one of the country's top arson sleuths. Casey is from a small town in the Texas Panhandle. He came to California in 1964 to attend Bakersfield Junior College and join the local fire department. He spent 15 years in the arson unit before retiring in 1994. He remembers attending one of Orr's seminars as part of his training to get state certified. Orr struck him as impressive but almost comically image-conscious. He showed up to teach in full uniform, with coveralls and boots and helmet.
I don't know if anybody else picked up on it, but I thought that was hilarious. You know, here he comes in, like a smoking gun, boy. I come in here, I'm taking off this, and I'm taking that. I said, wow, he don't have to do that. He could come in dressed, and he's, in regular clothes and to say, hi, guys, He came in just like he was coming in from a fire. Only thing that was missing, was the smoke coming off of him. This boy he was something else.
By 1987, Marvin Casey was a captain at the Bakersfield Fire Department. That year, he was called to the scene of a fire at a Kraft Mart in Bakersfield. Someone had thrown a delayed ignition matchbook into the artificial flowers.
Well, I responded out there, and I was met at the front door by an engine company captain, and he says, "Hey, I want to come take a look at this," because the fire had been extinguished, but they had to respond to go out and check it out and make sure. So as I was investigating the point of origin, the scene of the fire, I saw what I recognized as an incendiary device. This was made up of matches, cigarette butt, and a rubber band. The rubber band was attached, that's what they used to attach the matches to the cigarette. And as the cigarette burnt down, it ignited the matches, and that caused an open flame. So I recognized that, and I put it in an evidence bag. And then there was a piece of yellow-lined paper there, too, that was really in close proximity to it. So I just took it, too, because it was the only thing left in there. And I was curious about the yellow-lined paper. I had them to rake up all of the yellow-lined paper that they had in the store, and so I compared it to the one that I had put into evidence, and it didn't match any of them. So I knew then that possibly somebody had carried this in from the outside.
The lab found a fingerprint on the piece of paper, but could not initially connect it to anyone. Meanwhile, Casey was convinced that the Kraft Mart arson was connected to a whole spate of almost simultaneous fires in that area of Central California. There were fires in Tulare and fires in his town of Bakersfield, and by some great intuitive leap, Casey's mind connected these fires to an arson investigators conference that had been going on in Fresno at the same time. The fires moved south, as if the arsonist had been leaving the Fresno conference on the way to Los Angeles.
It had to be something more, than just, accidents.
He told his investigators his suspicion. The arsonist might have been one of the 200 people in attendance at the conference.
I said, you guys, there's something going on here. The conference ended Friday afternoon, and then it's like somebody was traveling, so they set the fire in Tulare, they set the fire in Bakersfield, and then there's, and on down south. I said, so it has to be somebody from Southern California and had to be traveling alone. So I kept insisting on this until I got the roster.
In attendance had been attorneys, insurance investigators, and fire investigators. He thought a fire investigator and one who had come to the conference alone was the likeliest culprit.
I insisted that it was a fire investigator because to me, that would be the only logical solution to the fires, the fires that we had.
He narrowed the attendees down to 50 possible suspects, but he could not do anything further with it.
We couldn't narrow it down any closer, so I had to put my fire on the back burner for 2 years until they had a symposium up in Monterey. And the same thing happened up there. There was a fire in Monterey, and then when the conference was over, there was fires along Highway 101. And it stops at San Luis Obispo. It's like somebody traveling down to Los Angeles. I said, wow. So I got a hold of the people that put the symposium on and got the roster from that, the attendees from that one. Then I compared them with the 50, and then I narrowed it down to 10.
John Orr, star arson investigator with the Glendale Fire Department, was one of the names.
It was really funny, too. Out of the 10 names, he was number 5, right in the middle.
The lab tried to match his prints to the fingerprint on the Kraft Mart device, but without success. 2 more years passed. In 1991, in response to an arson spree in LA County, the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives launched a task force with local cops. They quickly came to understand that the arsonist they were hunting had covered a huge territory, and they learned that Marvin Casey, a few hours north in Bakersfield, might have a lead. He had the print off the yellow paper from the Kraft Mart fire 4 years earlier. With more sophisticated techniques, the print was matched to Orr, but the lab thought the well-known investigator had just clumsily contaminated the evidence.
It was a guy from the lab called, and said, tell John to quit touching that evidence. Then I told him, I said, John didn't touch that evidence, says he wasn't anywhere around.
Then an ATF agent called to confirm it.
He said, was John with you whenever you investigated that fire at the Craft Mart store? And I said, no, absolutely not.
The ATF was zeroing in on John Orr and trying to keep the investigation quiet, but they needed Casey's help.
They came back and said, well, we're going to need this physical evidence now. And I said, well, now, why you need the physical evidence? I said, well, we've got a gag order. We can't tell you, the judge, we can't tell you anything. I said, hey, we're all professionals here. You tell me or you don't get the evidence. So they told me who it was, that it was John Orr's fingerprint. And then, boy, I'll tell you what, the back of my hair, I remember now it just cold chills. And I said, oh, gee whiz, why? This guy was my instructor, and I said, okay. Then I actually came to my senses and I said, well, big deal. Let's get him off the street. Let's get him.
Casey did not get a chance to interrogate Orr or tag along for the investigation, a fact that still rankles.
Little did I know that they were just going to grab that case, and I use the terminology bogart it, because that's what they did. They took it. It's like Humphrey Bogart when he got on the case, boy, he just dogged it until he got it. Well, that's what they did. I mean, I'd love to have interviewed John, in an interview room, because, your fingerprint just shouldn't have been on that piece of paper, buddy.
Vacation season is nearly upon us. This year, I'm treating myself to the luxe upgrades I deserve with Quince's high-quality travel essentials at fair prices. Like lightweight European linen styles from $30, washable silk tops, and comfy lounge sets. With premium luggage options and a stylish tote bag to carry it all. The best part, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us. I pride myself on being able to fit more than I should be able to in a carry-on. So I've got my eye on Quince's carry-on size suitcase. The only reason I haven't purchased it yet is because I'm torn between 3 different colors. For your next trip, treat yourself to the luxe upgrades you deserve from Quince. Go to quince.com/crimesofthetimes for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/crimesofthetimes to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/crimesofthetimes.
The task force investigators were on to Glendale Fire Captain John Orr. They examined every aspect of his life. He had grown up in Highland Park and served in the Air Force. Back in Southern California, he applied to the Los Angeles Police Department, but the psych test found him unstable. He applied to the LA Fire Department, but they found him physically unfit. In 1974, he found a job in Glendale, then one of the lowest-paying fire departments in the county. Orr gravitated to arson investigation and insisted on carrying guns.
This guy wanted to be a cop, too. He wanted to be a cop so bad.
This is Marvin Casey, the Bakersfield fire captain, who first alerted the task force to Orr as a suspect in a series of California arsons. Because of Orr's vast network of friends in the firefighter community, the task force had to keep the investigation carefully compartmentalized. Some of the people they had to tell were Orr's supervisors at the Glendale Fire Department. One of them mentioned that Orr had been trying to sell a novel. Orr had been inspired by a fiction writing course at Glendale Community College. The hero of his manuscript, Phil, is a tenacious gun-packing arson investigator in LA. The villain, Aaron, is a socially stunted pyromaniac who finds sexual arousal in the blazes he sets and who uses his specialized knowledge as a veteran firefighter to escape detection. Aaron loves the Santa Ana winds, his ally in havoc. His signature device is a lighted cigarette that burns slowly to an ignitable bead of glue, giving him 10 minutes to leave the scene.
They did share the manuscript with me, as they were bogarting the case, as I put it, they kind of ran with it. But anyway, they shared the manuscript with me, and I read through it and everything. Only thing that John did was just change the names. he was still the hotshot investigator, and he was really talking down about the local country bumpkins probably couldn't figure it out or something. That's what sticks in my mind still to this day. Yeah, country bumpkin got you, Johnny.
After Orr was arrested and charged with the fires in the Central Valley, Casey felt shunned at fire sleuth conventions. He had turned on one of the Brotherhood.
They still didn't believe it was John. It couldn't have been, You made a mistake. It's not John. I actually had to sit at a dining room table by myself. Then nobody would come around, because they disbelieved me. And I had one guy pass by me and look at me real hateful. And I'm not going to disclose his name. But anyways, he said, "He's innocent, I said, yeah, right. He's innocent. You tell me how come his fingerprints on that paper,
In 1992, Orr went on trial in Fresno for the Central Valley fires and spun a wild conspiracy theory. He said the fingerprint had been a government plant. He compared his plight to the Oliver Stone movie JFK. The jury did not buy it. He was convicted and got a 30-year term in federal prison. He went away railing about what he called flaws in the investigation.
Whenever he was found guilty in Fresno and everything, well, he wrote a letter to the judge about how poorly I did the investigation, that I did this wrong, I did that wrong. It was like this sucker was my instructor, and he was, giving me a grade. And I was really feeling bad. And then all of a sudden, as I was reading this, I just started laughing. And I was like, he's the one going to prison, big deal.
Soon after, Orr pleaded guilty to 3 other counts of arson and admitted to dropping an incendiary device at a builder's emporium in North Hollywood in 1990. His admission was a gift to LA County Deputy District Attorney Michael Cabral, who was preparing to try Orr on the most serious charges yet: 4 counts of murder for the fire at Ole's, the South Pasadena hardware store.
When I got that, I said he just pled into our case because we now have a fire with an admission he said it in our county.
After Orr's arrest, Cabral and a team of investigators had begun studying suspicious fires going back years around Southern California, trying to link them to Orr.
We gathered fires from all the communities in the, on the foothills of San Gabriel and even down in Alhambra and throughout Los Angeles. We literally went through every department's fire investigations going back 10 years and had them pull everything that seemed to match, very vague patterns of what we thought he might be doing, so then we could match them up. And then we compared many of those fires to some of the fires that were in the book. And most of the fires in the book we found that they were actually real fires.
This helped the prosecutor to assemble the ingredients of a case.
We found that he tended to set fires in, I guess I'd call them sprees, that there were always multiple fires on the same day in the same area. And that was sort of consistent with how the arsonist in the book worked. And he would set them that way to try to get a big fire going and really tax resources.
When they talked to firefighters who had worked alongside Orr, they also learned how consistently he had been able to detect incendiary devices.
He seemed to always be able to find the device, sometimes in situations where there should have been suspicions. Why is he able to find that device when people have been out here for hours looking for it and they couldn't find it, and he walks right up and goes right to the spot where it's at? But of course, the vast majority of them chose not to suspect him because he's one of us.
As he built his case, Cabral confronted some of the same resistance that Casey had faced, the reflexive need among fellow firefighters to protect one of their own, despite the mounting evidence against Orr.
There were some who felt we shouldn't prosecute him. There were some that expressed that directly to me and said, why would you prosecute him? He's one of us. And, that was quite kind of disgusting from my perspective, because those are exactly the people we should prosecute, the people that are one of us and then violate that trust. And that was really part of the heart of our argument to the jury, that we had provided him with special secret knowledge that only members of this small group of people know, and then he turned it against us.
When he put Orr on trial for the Ole's fire, Cabral had to explain how the sheriff's department had gotten it so wrong in 1984 when it decided the fire was caused by faulty wiring rather than arson. Cabral attacked the initial investigation as inadequate, run by a sergeant who devoted just 1.5 hours to studying the scene before reaching an erroneous conclusion. Cabral read jurors passages from points of origin that paralleled the Ole's fire scene. Orr was convicted again, and during the penalty phase, the defense put on a UCLA psychiatrist who described Orr as a pyromaniac in the grip of an irresistible compulsion he would never admit to. To do so, quote, would demonstrate to him that he's been a failure all of his life, the psychiatrist testified. The jury deadlocked on whether he should die. He was sentenced to life without parole.
The psychiatrist that they called to testify said that his whole world would collapse around him if he ever admitted it. He lives in this world that he didn't do this, and he can't admit it because then it would be admitting that he did something wrong, and he will not do that.
At the same time, he seems to enjoy the attention, no?
Yes. Oh, yes, he does.
What possesses him to write this book that does so much damage to his case? I mean, it implicates him. It almost serves as a roadmap to everything that he did. Why do that unless you have some kind of need to get caught?
I don't think it was a need to get caught. It was a need for credit, for notoriety. I don't think he figured that anybody would put it together. I think he thought, oh, they'll just think I wrote this from my experience. I think he thought he'd never get caught. And part of it is because he was doing it for so long, because he thought he'd figured everything out. And, of course, that goes back to that secret knowledge, right? He knew how they investigated it.
How many fires do you think in total John Orr set?
Well, it's my belief, based on what we saw, that it's probably in excess of 2,000, 2,200.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it is a pretty incredible number, and I really don't believe, based on what we saw, that was all of them. That there were many that we had no idea.
Were other people killed besides the Ole's case?
He claims to have killed 6 in the book. We only found 4.
Only one person knows how many fires John Orr actually set and how many people they killed.
You have a prepaid call from John Orr, an incarcerated individual at the Mule Creek State Prison, Ione, California. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
After the break, my conversation with the man the FBI calls the most prolific arsonist of our time.
I value sleep more in my 30s than I ever did in my 20s. A bad night's sleep can affect both my mood as well as my physical health. If I toss and turn all night, I really feel it in my neck and shoulders. I'm cranky. It's bad. That's why I'm so excited to share something that's made a real difference in my life, Beam's Dream Powder. Beam Healthy Nighttime Blend is packed with science-backed ingredients shown to improve sleep, so you can wake up refreshed and ready to take on the day, whether that's going to work or solving a cold case. Dream is made with a powerful blend of all-natural ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, epigenin, and melatonin. It's designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up feeling amazing. Beam has already improved over 17.5 million nights of sleep, helping people across the country wake up and feel their best. Here's the deal. Beam is giving my listeners their best offer yet of up to 40% off. Try their best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time. Go to shopbeam.com/crimes and use code CRIMES at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/crimes and use code CRIMES for up to 40% off. Solve the case of your bad sleep by trying Beam today.
Your position is that you have never set an illegal fire of any kind in your life?
No.
absolutely not. Training fires, yeah, I did a lot of live fire training, but nothing malicious or criminal ever.
John Orr is in his mid-70s and serving life in prison for the fires he set. He's now at Mule Creek State Prison. He answers journalistic queries promptly, even though he knows the questions will be harsh and the portrait likely ugly. Yet he talks, he told me, not because he relishes the attention, but because, quote, I don't want to be known as the guy who refused to cooperate. Never had the compulsion to set fires?
None whatsoever.
How did your fingerprint get on that incendiary device that was found at the Craft Mart in Bakersfield?
I've always said that it's not mine. It's absolutely not mine. It was the feds that fabricated this, and I say absolute fabrication because it's not my print. It can't be. And that was presented for the jury showed us to...
My conversation with John Orr continued in this vein. Even though he was convicted in 3 separate cases and pleaded guilty in one of them, he portrayed himself as the victim of a law enforcement conspiracy. He insisted that the portrait of the arsonist in his novel was not based on himself, but on some of the arsonists he had interviewed on the job, and the fires he described were based on fires he had studied. So what was their motive, though, to launch this complicated conspiracy to frame you?
They felt that was just too close to reality. It became a fact-based fiction, and it just seemed to be too coincidental for them to ignore, and somebody along the line just simply decided, let's go with this.
I read to him some passages from his novel describing the arsonist villain as an insecure loner, a man who craved attention, a man without regular friends. He wrote, quote, even his coworkers found him difficult to relate to. He needed the attention, and his fires gave him that. It was worth the risk. Is there any of you in that?
None of those characters he's applied to me. I was quite comfortable in the workplace, at parties. I had lots of friends.
During our call, I read Orr some more passages from his novel. So the chapter that really got you in trouble with the law was chapter 6 here. I'll just read the last paragraph. It's about the fire that you describe as Cal's Warehouse in South Pasadena. You say, there never was a follow-up investigation. The fire was ineptly termed accidental. Aaron was so furious that he set a nearly identical fire 2 days later in Hollywood at another hardware store. The investigating agency termed the fire arson, but no correlation was made to the Cal's fire. Aaron wanted the Cal's fire to be arson. He loved the inadvertent attention he derived from the newspaper coverage and hated it when he wasn't properly recognized. The deaths were blotted out of his mind. It wasn't his fault, just stupid people acting as stupid people do.
Once again, I was writing based on the creative writing experience I had from a class where the instructor said, make your protagonist a decent, likable guy, and make your antagonist, the bad guy, as evil as you can. So that last line, the one they played so heavily on, is just making the bad guy sound like a bad guy.
By the time I got John Orr on the phone, I knew enough about his personality to have no illusions. I had zero expectation that he'd confess his crimes to me. He did say something that surprised me, though. Do you regret writing Points of Origin, considering how much trouble it got you into?
Not at all. There's actually nothing in that book, regardless of what the prosecutor said, that was by, the chronicles of my crimes. It's nothing that's pure fiction, fact-based fiction, based on fires that I investigated in my own knowledge. But I'm not sorry that I wrote it, even though there's subsequent problems for sure.
He's always claimed that his novel was horribly misinterpreted as a veiled confession, that the whole world just misread it. And yet he did not regret putting it out there. If not for the book, you probably would not be where you are today.
Yeah, you're probably right, but I stand by my statement. I don't regret writing the book because it's not a confession. The way things happened, they happened.
John Orr tells me he has not written fiction in some time, but he pens articles for the prison newspaper, the Mule Creek Post. Some of the headlines: Finding Christmas Cheer in Dreary Confines, and How to Escape Prison Through the Library. When he isn't blaming a government conspiracy, he's blaming his own defense attorneys for ignoring what he calls solid evidence of his innocence.
This boy, he'll maintain his innocence for the rest of his life. This guy will never, never, never admit. If he admits it, he's done for. He's not the person he thinks he is.
For Marvin Casey, the retired Bakersfield fire captain, who did as much as anyone to catch him, it was a career case.
He wants the notoriety that, I set those fires. I want everybody to know it, but, I'm not going to admit it. He just needed the recognition. It's like whenever I told you how he came in the classroom and stripped off and everything. It's just like, hey, look at me. Look at me. Look what I've done. Look what I can do, too. But whenever he came time for him to socialize and be with the guys, he couldn't do it. He was like an introvert. He lived in John. I'm going to go set these fires. They're going to find out how good I am. It worked for a long time until he left his print here in Bakersfield. And this country bumpkin just stumbled along and found it.
From LA Times Studios, this is Crimes of the Times. To read more about these cases, check out Crimes of the Times at latimes.com. We also have a link to our video episodes in the show notes. This episode was written and reported by me, your host, Christopher Goffard. Our senior producers are Mary Knopf and Jonathan Shiflett, with sound design by Jonathan Shiflett. Executive editor is Deborah Anderlew. Associate producer is Jordan Patterson. Video editing by Cooper Kenward. Production services provided by JTB Studios. Our camera technicians and operators are Jeff Amlott, Julia McCabe, and Jason Newbert, with additional production support from Andrew Gombert, Patrick Stewart, and Anne-Marie Hauser. Denise Callahan is our studio manager. Ben Church is our production manager. Special thanks to LA Times Studios President Anna Magzanian, President and Chief Operating Officer of the Los Angeles Times, Chris Argenteri, and Executive Editor of the Los Angeles Times, Terry Tang. Crimes of the Times is executive produced and co-created by Darius Derrickson and me, Christopher Goffard.